Hello, everyone, and welcome in for another installment of the Salina Post Sports Friday Night Preview Show. I'm Tyler Henry. I'm joined here by Devin Hanney. And Devin, the wait is over. We have arrived. Playoff football in the state of Kansas will begin this week. It's the always interesting week 9, right? You get a lot of teams that typically, wouldn't be playoff teams. They're probably not going to make a run. But the beautiful thing about high school football is if you survived to this week, everybody's got a chance moving forward, and even if you're a top contender, you still got to take care of business this week.
It remains the notorious unnamed week by the Kansas State High School Activities Association. We have all these names that we can't keep track of, like sectional and sub-state and regional and all that. This is still week 9. It is the unnamed week, and I think that's partially because you do have the majority of the teams moving on, but you do have some teams that are just basically getting a week 9 game without a chance of moving into a playoff bracket. So it's a little bit of a hybrid of a week, but it's week 9 as we affectionately call it.
Normally, we take a look back at the week 8 scores, but we're going to go ahead and just dive right in, let you know where every single team in our area is, let you know what their matchup looks like this week, and we'll talk about some of these at length. We'll kind of go more briefly on others, but there is a lot of football to talk about this week. Let's ironically, though, start with talking about the teams that will not be in action this week, or at the very least, that will not be playing in games that will have playoff implications. And we'll begin with Bennington. The Bulldogs were eliminated. They will still have a non-bracket game against Sedgwick. That's a 1-7 Sedgwick team who, ironically, got their lone win this year over Harrington. You're also not going to have a Teskett game this week. The Trojans are 7-1, and six-man Devin. It's a little bit strange, right? Because they will play next week against 3-5 Chitopa, but there are only 2 games going on in six-man this week. Everybody else gets a bye, and then we'll kind of jump back into football the following week. But a weird setup in six-man.
Six-man is a wild, wild world of scheduling. And you said there's a couple of play-in games while everybody else is on a bye. You want to take that one step further. Cunningham, which is always a very solid team in six-man, we mentioned last week, they have one loss this year, and it's actually because they stepped out to play an 8-man team. They have a bye this week, but then the team they were supposed to play next week has already claimed a forfeit in that game. So Cunningham right now in six-man, they're sitting until the sectional, which is the 8-team bracket, and they will not play it until November 14th. So that's a little bit of a strange situation as well.
It certainly is. Then you get into the games that are playing this week. These all have playoff implications. And we're going to start with a group of games that, look, it's certainly not impossible any given Friday night, right? But you look at the teams that are probably going to be considered heavy underdogs this week. I'll throw them out there for you, Devin. If you have any notes or anything you want to talk about with these games, let me know. But these are kind of the long shots from our area entering the first round of the playoff. You've got a Salina South team that I think if they played in the ABCTL2 would be 500. But by virtue of their schedule, they are going to be 1-7, and they get a brutal draw in week number 1 of the playoffs. They have to travel to take on 6-2 Andover. Speaking of brutal draws, the Chapman Irish at 1-7 have to play the defending 3A state champions in Andale. No surprise to anybody. The Indians come into this game at 8-0. Down in 2A, Minneapolis is 3-5. They play Phillipsburg, who's 5-3. Normally, you look at that and you think, okay, that may not be the worst draw ever, except that last week Minneapolis had to go to Phillipsburg for their final regular season game, and Phillipsburg came out with a 66-7 win in that game. That is going to be a repeat of week number 8 for Minneapolis. Tough sledding for the Lions. And finally, down in 8-man, we've got a 3-5 Solomon team that is going to be on the road against 7-1 Lincoln. Those are the 4 teams from our area that I think a lot of people around the state expect will probably be taken out this week. I think South probably has the best chance to maybe make a little bit of noise there, Devin, but boy, some brutal, brutal draws for our area schools.
Yeah, and we're not being pessimistic here. We're not trying to haunt the schedules when we're talking about Halloween week. We're just being honest. I mean, you get to this point of the year, the reason why things are seeded the way they are is because your record shows who you are. Get a couple more wins during the regular season, you get a better position. But yeah, there are some unique things. Of course, we'll watch the Chapman Andale game just because Andale, they are tied right now with Southeast of Saline for the longest winning streak in the state of Kansas. That is 11-man, 8-man, 6-man. It is all classes. Also, the Minneapolis Phillipsburg game, I think, is a little bit of a strange deal just because that is a same game, same opponent, same type of deal. I think that score maybe set us back a little bit from last week, how bad Minneapolis lost that game. Hopefully the Lions can come in and show a little bit more tonight. I think maybe just the main mantra of our show is if you wonder when your team is going to play, make sure you check out one schedule, two schedule, three schedules. Go to the K-Show website. They do a nice job on there of actually highlighting the games in red that are being played on Thursday. They have also highlighted the games in red that have a time change for Friday. So while there are a lot of games on Thursday night, and I will go ahead and tell you, in 6A, there are 4 games on Thursday. 5A, there are 4 games on Thursday. 4A, there's just 1 game on Thursday night. 3A, there's 4 games. 2A, there are 7 games on Thursday evening, and in 1A, there are 8 games on Thursday evening. But there are a handful of games that are being played on Friday that are changed time-wise due to travel. Then, of course, as you said, the 8-man, 6-man games are almost all on Thursday night as well. But just pay extra special attention to your schedules on the teams that you want to follow. Don't make any assumptions on when those games are going to be played here in week number 1 of the playoffs.
Yeah, this year it is, this week it is kind of the Thursday and Friday night preview show here for us. Let's go ahead and get into teams that are favored, or at least on the bracket are favored to win this week. 2 that I don't think we need to spend a ton of time on are games that should go comfortably the way of the team that is favored, and that is Salina Central 7-1 taking on 1-7 Topeka West, and El Saline at 7-1 taking on 3-5 Washington County. Given the way El Saline and Central have played this year, you really don't see any cause for concern with those 2 teams making it to the second round, do you, Devin?
It may be another short night for El Saline. They may get this thing over early, which, this time of year, it's not going to hurt you at all. Stay healthy, stay fresh, get on to the next round. I think we're all waiting with bated breath on the edge of our seats, right, to see what this El Saline team can do. We were about the same point with the Cardinals last year when they ran into that game and ended up playing in, on a field that just was not in a condition to be played on. And I think, unfortunately, they got bounced out a round or 2 early because of that. I think we're all waiting to see what the Cardinals are put up this year with it, and just as far as field conditions and things like that. You also kind of look to the next week for Salina Central. They should win tonight against Topeka West. You never really know about those Topeka City League schools. But if Central can win tonight, that's going to set up a rematch with Goddard with them next week. So I think the Mustangs will have a problem. I think the Cardinals will move on tonight as well.
It may. That is one thing to keep an eye on as well, just kind of setting up what might be coming down the pipe. Goddard at 5-3, taking on a really good 4-4 Mason South team that's played a tough schedule. But the fun thing to look ahead to with El Saline, if they can get the win, more than likely, it's going to be a revenge game for them. They will get 7-1 Madison, the team that came in and knocked them out of the playoffs on that muddy field in weird conditions. Now, Madison's a lot better this year than they were a season ago. Both teams would come in at 8-1, but that'll be one to kind of keep an eye on throughout the course of the playoffs. We should have 2 really good teams, or really good games tonight. We'll talk about the games that will be on broadcast coverage for tonight in our final segment, but for right now, let's talk about these 2. Abilene, 5-3. What's the reward for flipping a 3-5 record to a 5-3 record? Oh, I don't know. How about playing the defending state champions in Andover Central? Now, they do come in at 4-4, but remember, they play a diet of almost exclusively 5A and even some small 6A teams. If Abilene can get the win, they get to play against Cape and Mount Carmel. So, boy, we talked about brutal draws for our teams that were sub 500, but for Abilene, this is tough sledding for the Cowboys.
It is, and I mean, the saving grace for Abilene is you've played competition in your own right in the NCKL that is very, very good. Clay Center is no laughingstock. Also, you played Wamego, you played Rock Creek. You have been in some high-octane games. And again, I feel like anytime we bring up the Abilene Cowboys, we bring up the fact that we have seen them play in games that are mind blowers. We've seen them win a 3-0 game. Then we've seen them rack up 50+ points in the first half and just cruise through. It'll be interesting to see what Abilene can do tonight. I think when you look at anytime you play a defending state champion in the playoffs, you know that team has an objective, and that is to get back where they were the year before and have a chance to defend that title. It's an opportunity tonight for Brad Nix and his Cowboys.
It's also an opportunity for Josh Homolka and the Ellsworth Bearcats, who will take on a 5-3 Hillsboro team. Both teams are 5-3, and that's another chance for a little bit of revenge. Remember, Hillsboro didn't just win that game earlier this season. It was 42-14, a score that I think you and I both looked at and said, that's not what we expected there. But if you're Ellsworth, you get a chance to, kind of avenge that and then potentially look at making a playoff run. As someone who's seen both of those teams play against Southeast of Saline, Devin, what's kind of your temperature taking on that game?
Tyler, I don't know, man. I think watching both these teams play, I still come away from that thinking that Ellsworth is the better all-around football team. Their ground game is solid. What they did last week with Southeast of Saline and taking their sophomore quarterback, Carson Jacobs, and making him a runner, and knowing that the focus was going to be on Tucker Goss, and not only making Jacobs a runner, they threw the ball more against Southeast than what they have any other game this season. And Jacobs looked good doing it. He's just a sophomore. I think maybe that momentum that Ellsworth has, got to keep in mind, 7.5 minutes left against Southeast of Saline. That's a 4-point game. I think maybe they took some positive momentum out of that. I still go back to the week that we got the final score, and I saw that Hillsborough put up 50-plus points against Ellsworth, and it just kind of flipped that 2-3 spot in the district all the way around from what we were expecting. This is an intriguing game to me. If you ask me 2 minutes before kickoff to pick a winner, I'm not sure I could. I'm going to be watching this one intently to see what goes on in this game between Ellsworth and also Hillsborough.
Should be a lot of fun. Well, we'll go ahead and take a break. When we come back, we'll actually have a chance to sit down and chat with head coach Brad Nix, get his thoughts on a big game against Andover Central in the season the Abilene Cowboys have put together. That is right around the corner. This is the Salina Post Sports Thursday and Friday night preview show. It's brought to you by the good folks at Kansas Wesleyan University. Back here on the Salina Post Sports Friday night preview show presented by Kansas Wesleyan. We're joined now by Abilene head coach Brad Nix. And Coach Nix, first and foremost, thank you for giving us some of your time today.
Hey, you bet. Thanks a lot for having me on. I appreciate it.
So your program took a 3-5 regular season a year ago. You flipped that into a 5-3 campaign this time around with a very similar looking core of guys. What do you attribute most to the improvement you've seen this season?
Yeah, I think it's our senior class. We've got 14 seniors, and they're awesome. They're great kids. They worked really hard. I think they kind of took the 3-5 last year personally, and just like what any coach would want, they hit the weight room hard. They worked really hard over the summer, and we had a great off season, and it kind of springboarded us into the season.
Well, and now that you've had a chance to see this specific team for 8 weeks, what would you say has become kind of the strength of Abilene football this year going into the playoffs?
I think it's our defense, and I think I would have said this at the beginning of the year, but our defensive line, our offensive and defensive line, really, but especially our defensive line, they've played so well, this year, and it's I think that defensively, anytime you've got a good D line, you got a chance, and Heath Hookman and Jackson Cuba are defensive ends, and Pierce Castile, and Kale Castile, on the inside, and so they've played great all year, and it's really helped. Some of our linebackers and safeties be able to do what they do. And I think we've got great DBs as well. Tegan Funston and Levi Evans both have 3 or 4 picks on the year. So
kind of on the other side of that coin, where do you feel like you still need to see this team, maybe buckle down a little bit to, make a run here in the playoffs?
Just taking care of the ball. Last week we had 3 turnovers, and that really hurt us. It was 6-3, and at halftime against Wamego, who's a very good team, and we ended up with 3 turnovers, and I think that hurt us. So we just got to take care of the ball and not beat ourselves with penalties and turnovers.
You brought them up a moment ago. Your defense has been playing, outstanding football this season. You also mentioned some of the individuals that have gotten it done, but as a unit, how have you seen that defense kind of grow and evolve throughout the course of the season?
It's been great. Heath and Jackson, some of those guys, they started last year for us, but it's been great to see, Ethan Evans, who we moved inside linebacker, as a junior, played really well. David Cuba, who didn't really see the field up much at all last year, and Aiden Woods, those guys are all safeties, and it's been really fun to watch those guys evolve kind of into their role. I always say, especially on defense is, 11 guys doing 11 different things, and, do your job and do it well. And those guys have found where their piece of the puzzle is. And it's been fun to watch them grow and get better all throughout the year.
Offensively, this is a team that has certainly gotten the job done when you've needed to, but, where do you feel like that group can still maybe get even better down the stretch?
I think just maintaining our blocks. We want to run the ball, and so just continuing to maintain our blocks, and allowing Lane and Tegan to run the ball. I think that's just something that it's something we want to pride ourselves on. We want to be able to run the ball and do that, and so I think just maintaining our blocks and staying on that and keep going.
obviously as a coach, you know what you have coming into a year, but there are surprises every season. What have been some of the nice surprises that have come out of Abilene football this year?
I think probably the first couple that come to mind, Braden Blake, he's a first-year starter on our offensive line. And, I won't get too deep into his story, but, he's a kid that was, 350 pounds, and not very strong. And he's down to like 275. He can move. He broke our squat record, over the summer. He's just worked really, really hard. And so it's been fun to watch him. And I said him before, but Aiden Woods, he's a kid who didn't play a whole lot last year as a junior and has really stepped in and done a great job. And so that's been awesome and so proud of those guys.
Your team had a lot of goals coming into the season. One that I remember you told me preseason you wanted to host a playoff game. Well, here we are. You're 5-3. You get home field for the first round of the playoffs. How huge is it to know that you'll be on your own turf in front of your own fans this week?
It's huge, like you said. I've told our younger kids, to relish this because they don't give these away. It'll be I think it's the third time that we'll host a playoff game since like 2011, I think. And so it's tough. It's hard to do. But it's, our stadium is beautiful. That credit our Board of Education superintendent who did all that and all the donations. And I love our Cowboy Stadium is an awesome place to be on a Friday night in front of our home crowd. And it's an awesome feeling for the kids. Our seniors get to run out of that tunnel one more time and with the band playing and that's a special thing. And so I'm excited for them and get the opportunity to play at Cowboy Stadium.
There are a lot of things in a football season that you can control. The playoff bracket really isn't one of them. It comes down to tiebreakers and luck of the draw. You get Andover Central this week. If you win, you'll have to deal with Cape and Mount Carmel. How do you feel about just the draw that you guys have gotten and kind of where you line up on the bracket?
It's tough, and it comes down to point differential. We got the 8th seed at 5-3, which is tough. I mean, with a 5-3 record, you expect to be a little bit higher, but there happens to be the 5, 6, 7, and 8 seed are all 5-3, and so it comes down to a point differential. And we played some close games, so we kind of drew the short end of that, but. It's tough. We've got a tough road to hoe, and but we're just going to buckle down and go. Andover Central is a very good football team. They're very well coached. Obviously, they won state last year in 4A. They lost a lot of pieces of that, but they got great coaches, and they play a tough schedule. They play a lot of 5A schools, and so they're a good football team. And then obviously Cape and with the exception to a loss to a very good 6A school or 5A school in St. James. I mean, they really haven't been tested yet either. So I don't know that much about Cape and yet. Hopefully we'll be worried about that next Monday, but. Andover Central, they're good, and it'll be a tough game, and we'll have to play well.
Well, and speaking of tough schedule, I mean, you guys get to go through an NCKL where you play Wamego, Marysville, Rock Creek, Clay Center. Concordia's been good at times. Do you like being in a league like that, especially now that you get to the playoffs? And do you feel like those games prepare you for games like this?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, our league is tough, like you said, and they're great coaches in our league. It's a battle every single week. You've got to really come out and get after it and go. So it does. It prepares you for the playoffs. It prepares you for nights like we're going to have on Friday. I was telling the kids, Rock Creek, it reminds me a lot of Andover Central reminds me a lot of Rock Creek. And I said, guys, we went into that game, we were up 14-7, almost right before half. They scored it right before half to make it 14-14. And so, we got to have, that gives us a little bit of confidence, and we know that, we can play with great teams. And so that's what it's going to take on Friday. And so obviously being in a tough league helps us. But at the same time, it doesn't help you when you get ranked, you're 5-3 with a low point differential. But other than that, it's been great.
Well, and last thing for you here, Coach, you brought it up a moment ago, but here we are, opening round of the playoffs. You get the defending state champions in Class 4A. What is going to have to go right for your team here on Friday night to pull this off and advance to the second round of the playoffs?
Well, our defense is going to have to play great, and we've leaned on them all year, and so that's what I expect out of them, and I know they'll come out and give great effort and do that, but again, I think it comes down to no turnovers, no penalties, and be sure tacklers. So I think I probably said that every time we talked, but no penalties, no turnovers, and be sure tacklers. If we can do that, we're going to be in it, and hopefully we can pull it out.
Well, Coach Nix, thank you so much for your time, sir, and best of luck to your Cowboys on Friday night.
You bet, Tyler. Hey, thanks a lot for having me on.
Once again, that was Brad Nix, head coach of the Abilene Cowboys. We'll step away, but when we return, we'll get you ready for both broadcasts that you can tune in across our Salina Post Sports Network right here. It's the Friday Night Preview Show. It's presented by Kansas Wesleyan University. Welcome back in here on the Salina Post Sports Friday Night Preview Show presented by Kansas Wesleyan University. We're back here talking about two matchups that you can tune in for. One will be tonight on Thursday night. That'll feature Southeast of Saline against Southwestern Heights. The other game will be a Friday game between Sacred Heart and Marion. And let's go ahead and begin with the Southeast of Saline game. Devin, it's hard not to be a little dismissive, right? Given what we've seen out of Southeast over the last few years. I know they do have some injury issues, but this is a game that I think everybody expects the defending 2A state champions to win, and I have a hard time seeing a way that is not the way that this game goes down tonight.
Yeah, this will be an early game again for the Southeast starters probably, and that's not to disrespect Southwestern Heights at all. The Southwestern Heights team, they have a roster of 22 guys. They have struggled with injuries this year. They've also just struggled with overall numbers. J.R. Mendoza, their head coach, told me that he has a nice group of seniors. That's only 6 people deep, though. He knows what Southeast of Saline is. He knows that it is a David versus Goliath type of matchup tonight. And it's just one of those games that Southeast of Saline still seems extremely focused to me. And I can't put my thumb on it, whether it's the injuries that they have sustained and it just kind of being forced to refocus, or if it's just, we are not assuming anything and any round is going to be a gift to us. When I talk to Mitch Gebhardt, he is extremely focused. Doesn't sound like a guy that's on a 21 game winning streak and that's going back to defend the title, but obviously it is a 1-0 type of atmosphere every single week, and they are extremely focused on this Mustang team from Southwest Heights.
Yeah, it's a Mustang team that had to play a brutal schedule. You look at the teams they faced this year: Hugoton, Hoisington, Cimarron, all the way down to Holcomb, an undefeated team last week. But even then, like you said, you expect this one to go the way of Southeast of Saline. Of course, you'll hear more pregame coverage of that coming up following the Friday Night Preview Show on KINA. And you can tune in for the game on KINA or on Salina Post with live video and audio coverage. A little bit of a more interesting matchup potentially coming up on Friday. That will feature 5-3 Sacred Heart at home against 6-2 Marion. Now, this is a Sacred Heart team that I don't think we have said, and we've said a ton about them this year, but maybe not enough about how much they have improved. If you want a chance to go out and prove it, here's your shot. Sacred Heart lost to Marion 70-31 in the opening round of last year's playoffs. You may think, okay, Marion 6-2. Who are those losses against? Well, one of them came against 7-1 Inman. One of them came against 6-2 Mound Ridge, and both of those teams lost to an undefeated Sterling team, and then one beat the other. Those are the only losses on the books for Marion's opponents this year. So make no mistake, despite the fact that they are at home, I do not think this is a game that Sacred Heart is going to be favored in, but what an opportunity for the Knights to go out and show how far they've come.
When you look at a crossover with another district and getting another team, this is like worst case scenario, I think. Marion is very, very good. The positive thing, of course, as you said, it is at the campus of Kansas Wesleyan on Sacred Heart's home field. To me, this game is all about the response. How do you respond? How does Ryan Krychek's kids respond to losing what was a defensive classic? It was a heartbreaking loss for them last Friday, going into overtime scoreless and losing that game to Republic County. Now, how do you respond to it? Do you take some of that heartbreak and do you bottle it up and come out and play a great game tonight against Marion? That's what it's going to take, let's be honest, and move on to the second round? Or are you stuck in the rut of losing that game? I'm curious to see how the week of preparation is going to shine tonight for them and how they're able to take that result last week into the game on Friday night.
We will find out. Nicholas Fierro will be on the call for that one. A reminder, you can catch that on our Salina Post YouTube page with live video and audio commentary and right here on Salina Post as well. Hey, also, don't forget, all throughout the playoffs, for highlights, for graphics, for scores, for updates, be sure to follow us on Facebook at Salina Post, on Twitter or X at SPostSports, and of course, for live video coverage, head on over to our YouTube page at Real Salina Post or Salina Post Sports. Also, before we go, one quick note, Kansas Wesleyan has a heck of a game coming up on Saturday afternoon. It'll be a 1 o'clock kick, 12 o'clock pregame. You can catch that one on KINA. They will be taking on the fourth-ranked, that's right, nationally fourth-ranked team in the country and the number one offense in the country in the Friends Falcons. That game is going to be played at Equity Bank Park at the baseball stadium that the Wichita Wind Surge play in. So be sure to come back to KINA for that. It should be a fun one this Saturday at 1 p.m. But that'll do it for us. One last time for Tyler Henry, for Devin Hanney. Thank you so much for tuning in here on Thursday to the Friday night preview show. High school playoffs get underway, and they start tonight. Southeast of Saline pregame coming up right after this. That'll do it for us. The show's brought to you by the good folks at Kansas Wesleyan University.